Good morning, Jersey. I can't thank you enough for having me here. I honestly don't think I've experienced this type of welcome and kindness in any business environment, certainly, that I've been in. And I really feel like the whole island was pulling for me and my luggage. So thank you so much. I enjoyed shopping rapidly on your high street. And I'll say that part of my Jersey experience was also walking to the castle and getting my feet wet on the way back, because I understand you have very fast tides. So this Canadian thought, I'll go and see the sunset, and I did. And then I had to use a hairdryer to dry my running shoes since they were my only pair. So it's just been an amazing experience, so thank you. So let me tell you, this is not a slide you need to read unless you're looking for an eye test here. But just want to tell you a little bit about Impact Canada. So you saw from our video sort of what our key methods are. But our raison d'etre is really about closing the gap between policy intention and the delivery and implementation of policy and programs. So that's really key of why we exist, is we are somewhere for the government to help explore cross-mandate ideas, complex ideas, to start with an idea and figure out how to actually deliver it. So we were established in 2017. We are inside the King's Privy Council for Canada. We're all getting used to saying Kings then, aren't we? And that is effectively the Prime Minister's department. So we are centrally located with a high level of support for the work that we do. And I mentioned a little bit about our business lines. And so over the years, we've really refined our work down to two key business lines, and that's Impact Canada Challenges. Oh, don't do that. Which I work on, and Applied Behavioral Science. So I'll just keep moving through these. So I wanted to show you a little bit about the priorities that we work on. So both on the behavioral science side and on the challenges side, we've winnowed our work down to a set of key priorities. And like many countries, these will be top priorities dealing with agriculture. Canada is also a significant agricultural producer, as well as health and public health, which we've all been sort of quite preoccupied with over the last couple years. Climate action, very important to Canada and certainly to our current Prime Minister. Infrastructure and housing. Again, I know a key concern here on Jersey, and I am lucky enough to work on a few space-related projects where we are equipping North American astronauts for long space travel. So there's a job I never thought I would be doing in government, is figuring out how to grow food in remote environments. But this is where our innovation and impact will lead you. So just want to give you just a bit of a flavor of the type of projects that we work on. So this is our challenge portfolio. You'll see that the type of projects we work on are vast, everything from food waste to increasing housing supply to reducing opioid overdose. And so you can see the size and scope. Some of our challenges might be $500,000, and other challenge programs will run up to $300 million and more. And so right now we currently have about 30 challenges that we're working on, valued at around $835 million. So that's how our portfolio has grown over the last 5 years, starting with a few challenges and ramping up. And this year we'll launch new challenges, for example, in methane reduction, which is a key priority for the agricultural sector. So I wanted to mention, looking at some of the priorities for Digital Jersey, for example, a few things that we have in common. So if you haven't been to Canada, we are a population of 38 million, far, far less than our neighbors to the south. We are 10 million square kilometers. To our west coast is the Pacific Ocean. To the east coast is the Atlantic Ocean. To the north is the Arctic Ocean. And to the south is a 9,000-kilometer border that we share with the United States. And so Canada itself is a country of different cultures, geographies, languages. And so when we work in the federal government, you're thinking across those 10 million kilometers. We have 10 provinces and 3 territories, and an Indigenous population, as well as a bilingual country. So there's a bit of a sense of what Canada is like and what it's like to work federally and think across all of those different populations and geographies. So I wanted to have a look at some of the things here that we have in common. And so of course, looking at productivity in economic sectors. For us, we will look at using challenges to incentivize that marketplace and to continue to grow that marketplace. So when we look at natural resources, which are a key commodity for Canada, we're looking at ways to improve what you do with the waste from mining, for example. That was our Crush It challenge. And so we're trying to improve natural resource sector economies. Food waste reduction is a $20 million challenge that we've been working on, and that's really about injecting incentives into that market for people to continue to reduce their food waste. In Canada, we waste almost half of the food that we buy, and I don't think we're unusual in that way. Most of it is dairy and produce, so we have a problem that we need to work on, and we're trying to find solutions in the challenge areas everywhere from expanding business models to extending the shelf life of food or creating new edible products from food waste. So those are some of the ways that we look to try and incentivize economic sectors. We also, I've mentioned that we have a behavioral science team, and the behavioral science team also works on things like trying to get Canadians to do things that we need them to do from a policy perspective, like buying electric vehicles or adopting heat pumps, or, for example, using the funding better within a climate action program. So we have behavioral scientists who are helping to understand why this fund is not accomplishing what it needs to be accomplishing. So just moving on to looking at new sectors, how are we creating a spark in the market where no other natural incentive exists? So the government may be the only one who is going to incentivize this market. And so, for example, we have an accelerator we're very proud of about women in Cleantech. There are 4% of Cleantech companies in Canada that are owned by women. We saw that as very problematic, and so we looked at developing an accelerator to boost the businesses of 6 particular women. And the person that's won that challenge has gone on to generate over $100 million in funding since our challenge closed. So they present significant opportunities to scale beyond what happens in a challenge. So just moving on, of course, housing. I know housing is a significant issue here. It's also a significant issue in Canada. We have similar, the average cost of a house in Canada is $600,000, so similar to here. And so we have people who are unhoused and underhoused and have no way of getting into the housing market. And so we're running a $300 million housing supply challenge to look at everything from the use of data to how to expedite permits to how to have neighbors accept that there will be urban densification. So just moving on again, the health and well-being of islanders, of course, it's always important to government. So we're looking at everything from how to address food security, how to detect fentanyl in the drug supply, how to prevent diabetes, which, this is a 100-year-old problem. So this will be especially challenging for us, is working at the community level on detection and diagnostic solutions. Sustainable transport. So we've run a Smart Cities initiative, which was about using data and technology to improve communities. And so many of those you'll see addressing transportation or housing or other key infrastructure issues. And of course, we're all looking at responding to the climate emergency. So from Impact Canada's perspective, we do both challenges to incentivize new solutions in the market, as well as longitudinal monitoring of what Canadians are thinking and feeling and will or might do around climate. So hopefully, to make this a little relevant, hope for all of you, I wanted to just reflect on a few things I've learned about building an innovation program in the last 5 years. So my advice always is, first, don't seek to innovate. And so people will say to me, I want to innovate, or I want to run a challenge. And the first thing I would say to them is, what is the problem that you are trying to solve? And so I think it's so important that we don't get seized with a method or a tool before we really understand the problem that we're trying to solve and whether we have the right levers to actually address that. So methods and tools will come later, and during we might spend 6 months trying to understand a problem that we're trying to solve through challenges, and in the end we may or may not recommend that this is the right method to use to solve your problem. So don't first seek to innovate, to me, is a very important lesson that we've learned. And of course, I've talked about the reason we were established, which is to close the gap. So mind the gap here between the people who are developing policy, whether those are politicians or ministers, deputy ministers, or policy staff, and the people who are involved in implementation. So for those of us in Impact Canada, most of us have been here since the inception. And so we're able to see what was the idea, how is the idea being carried out, and how are we assessing the impacts of those ideas. Here's the other part you may have realized when you try and do a new program, that just because you build it, they may not come. And so in our first couple years of running this program, we met with a lot of resistance and uncertainty. That was what we were doing was considered to be risky or uncertain. And so we had to do a lot of tell at all levels. And so a lot of socializing about what we were doing. But that only goes so far. You have to get to proofs of concepts and precedents. And government especially likes to understand a precedent, that maybe they're not the first organization to do this, and they can build on that. Another important lesson for us, I think, has been when you change the expectations of your funding. So for us, we work on outcomes-based funding models. That means that we pay when an outcome has been accomplished. We don't advance funding in challenges. So it's a very different orientation for funding. So when we change those expectations about how the government would award money, you have to help innovators meet them. And so we do a lot of capacity building both inside the government and outside so that we can be successful in our program. And so one of the things that I think has been very important is building a backbone that enables innovation. And Digital Jersey, I think, is a really good example of that, that you need an infrastructure, and you need a team, and you need methods and tools and a strict methodology. So to develop and iterate your methodology specific to your context. So you may find things that you like about what Canada does or what Estonia does or what Nesta has done, and you really have to consider, how do I adapt that to the context that I'm working in? And so for us, we continue to look at international examples and then make them contextually relevant. And so just to mention, when Impact Canada was established, what we were given was a salary allocation and a set of flexible terms and conditions that allow us to pay differently. But what we actually needed to succeed in the program was a fellowship program where we recruit people from outside of the public service, we train them on our methods and tools, and then we lend them to departments to actually do the work. And those departments then pay us back their salaries. So without, and the fourth component, of course, is the Impact Canada platform. So if you haven't seen it, please visit impact.canada.ca. It's where we host all of our challenges and include all of our behavioral science data. That's been an invaluable tool to our partners because every challenge we launch is hosted there. All the data is collected there. The jury who assesses the challenge applications have a secured portal to do that. And it's allowed us to create a brand. So everything that you see here, all of our graphics and imagery, even the voiceover for the video is done in-house by our graphic designers. So those components have really, what we started with and what we needed to succeed over 5 years, we had to sort of double our efforts. So I will say we are salary capped at 19, but we actually have 63 employees. And that's as a result of the fellowships and the cost recovery. So one really important thing that I've learned here, I've worked in many funding programs in government, and it's about, the government has a lot more to offer, for example, than funding. So one of the key components of Impact Canada challenges is the use of non-financial supports, where we will look across government science and tech resources, and we will say, can we provide them access to laboratories? Can we test and validate their solutions? Can we provide them access to networking and business development? So again, similar to some of the services that Digital Jersey provides, is a wraparound approach. But for the government to think that what we have to offer is funding and that that has to naturally be an arm's length relationship has not helped us to meet our objectives. So for us, we really have focused on building the capacity of solvers and confidence in the method by accessing horizontal science and tech resources and building important partnerships between government and Canadians. Okay, so my last lesson here is really about some of the tough lessons I've had in falling in love with projects that perhaps will not, where the departments do not have the capacity or the will or the resources. So you might say, this is a great idea, we really should do this. But you can lead a horse to water, but as I've learned, you can't hold its head under until you force it to drink. And so in some of the things we've had to learn, I said to my boss when I started this, I'm going to fall in love with progress and not projects, because we're an enabler. That means that we cannot ensure that everything happens. It's up to Canada, it's up to the government. So we say explore everything, and as a new business, essentially, we were willing to do a smattering of projects to see who could work with us and what it might accomplish. But that was a lot of effort on our behalf. And sometimes you might spend up to a year negotiating a project or a challenge that the department does not move forward on. So for us, we had to take note of where we were having successes. And we've had able to grow our portfolios more in economic and science-based departments because we feel like there's perhaps less cultural sensitivities when you're not dealing with a social department. And so for us, that's been really important to lean into a few portfolios, and we showed you what some of those were in the front. So previously, we might have been working on things in education or essential skills, or which were important, but were really a scatter approach. And if we want to have impact in sectors and we want to be able to measure that collective impact, we need to work together on. So bringing together behavioral science and challenges and working on a set of key portfolios has been really important for us. So a few things. So what do? After you're sort of in this, you've been doing this for 5 years, and you're looking at what does your next 5 years look like. So here's a few sort of key components for us in Impact Canada. We always have a relentless focus on outcomes and impacts. And sometimes when you're in the planning of something and we get sort of lost in the details, we always come back to what is the problem that we're trying to solve, what is the outcome that we're trying to attain, and how do we know when we get there. And so the other thing that we've really been doing as someone who is trying to break new ground in using these methods and tools is making sure that you're generating evidence and that you're capturing and sharing that evidence. Because part of our raison d'etre is to build the capacity of the public service. It's not to hold all of this knowledge and skills inside a hub, but to disperse it. I mentioned HR innovation. So without our fellowship program, and our cost recovery approach, we would not be able to grow from 19 to 63. And at 19, there's no way we could take on a portfolio the size that we have. So we ourselves have had to be innovative. But in order to ask for cost recovery from your colleagues, essentially, you need to have demonstrated your value. So this is not something that we introduced in years 1 and 2. So we really need to figure out, are we demonstrating value to our colleagues to the extent that we can now ask for cost recovery? So that's been something that's really enabled us to grow. Certainly looking at different ways of knowing is very important, everything from tax data to behavioral science to help inform our decisions. And always focusing on increasing trust. And the way that we look at increasing trust is by opening up the decision-making process and showing people how we're designing and making decisions around funding. So I just wanted to say again, thank you. S'il y a les Gériens ici, merci bien d'être fait pour m'avoir ici. And so I'm going to close on a video that really, I think, reinforces this. And as I'm saying, the solutions matter. The methods and tools matter. The infrastructure really matters. But the reason why we do this is to have an impact on people. So I'm going to close on a video that is the chair of one of our juries where we were focusing on drug checking. And I think he really illustrates why this is so important.